All right, welcome back to another episode of the Four Wide Podcast. As always, Jeremiah Stoddard, Jonathan Williams, and Dan the Man Kiley. Gonna have a fun episode for you. We haven't done an episode since the NFL season had come to a close, but we are branching out into our other aspects of our show that we haven't done so far. We focus so much on the NFL during the season this year, or during the off season. Right now, we are focusing on everything else that's going on in the sports world. You name it, and we will talk about it if you want us to. So we're going to talk some of the NFL draft stuff that's coming out. I know Todd McShay released his top 10 picks after that blockbuster first pick overall trade with the Bears and Panthers. So we're going to discuss some of that. March Madness bracket came out today as well. I know Jonathan and Dan are excited to talk about some basketball on the show. And then also World Baseball Classic going on along with spring training for baseball as we inch closer to the season starting for the MLB as well. So we're going to get into a few different things. So it's going to be a good one. Fellas, how we feeling? Being back on camera.
Finally, glad we were able to get back. I know we had some issues with our schedules and whatnot because, trying to get three people to do a show at once sometimes on the weekends can be a little bit of an issue, especially when you two have actual jobs. Dan has kids as well, and then me, of course, in college and whatnot. So we got a lot of stuff going on. But I'm excited, especially because we have so much news to talk about. The brackets, the teams for March Madness got announced today, literally probably a couple hours ago. And then also, as you said, the blockbuster trade between Carolina and Chicago happened. A lot of stuff to talk about there. And then even just with the NFL draft as well, whether it's, Georgia players lighting up the NFL Combine again, kind of launching themselves into the first round or higher up in the first round in some instances if you're Nolan Smith. And then as well as the World Baseball Classic, opening day is approaching. MLB teams are ramping up, getting ready, trying to finalize those opening day rosters. And I've said it on our show, Jeremiah, and I believe I've said it on here before. This is my favorite time of the year for sports because you just have it all. You have a little bit of everything. Spring practice is starting to go for Georgia as well. That's starting this week. Everybody's getting back from spring break. You got baseball, you got basketball. You have everything you could want in this 1 month over the next 4 weeks. And it's just freaking fantastic. So I'm hyped to talk about all of this. I'm so pumped up for it.
I don't know if this is my favorite sports time of the year, but I sure as hell love this time of year. I mean, you have a lot of stuff coming to an end and a lot of stuff coming to a beginning. I really like that one stretch. I want to say it's around the same time as the Kentucky Derby. I believe you just have a lot of stuff going on right there. Yeah, I don't remember exactly what it all is that week, but I just remember that's about the time that everything's popping off. Maybe that's when the championship games are. But yeah, March Madness. March Madness to me is really the absolute best that first week, right? The Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Those 4 days are elite, just elite. And you can watch teams you haven't even heard of, you haven't watched season long. You have instant buy-in, and it's just incredible. Such a great time of the year, and I am excited about this show today because we have so many different things to talk about. And don't get me wrong, we really enjoyed covering the NFL. I think we've all bought into that, but this is really our wheelhouse now where we just get to talk sports.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good. And just to go ahead and throw my 2 cents in on the best week of or best month of sports, it's got to be, to me, it's in the fall. Once college football starts back up, you got the NFL going on, NBA season's going on, baseball's going on, everything at once. And you're in baseball's coming towards its close as it's winding down, getting close to October. I think September to October is my favorite time of year for sports because everything is good. Jonathan and I have had this argument on our show. I think that was one of our King of the Hill topics one time, best month of sports. This was the one that he picked, and his reasons, because March Madness and even the Masters and stuff come in April as well, which is always a good time. That's the first weekend of April. I think it's the 6th or something like that.
Opening day that week.
Yeah, you get baseball started back. It's a good. I'm not gonna lie, it is a good period of time because March Madness is so exciting.
Maybe
you were talking about both.
Maybe I'm just partial because when college football season isn't in full go, I'm just kind of looking for anything and everything to be excited about with sports. And so I really just this is my time to just really indulge in everything because like Dan said, this opening week of March Madness is the freaking best. There's just something special about from noon until basically midnight. You can watch a game until the end and you flip over to another one and you catch the last 6 minutes. And it's just that way for the entire night. And it's just freaking awesome because you just don't miss anything. There's so much going on.
And there's something about that do or die basketball, man. It's fun to watch.
It's just freaking awesome.
But can we just say that whoever is in charge of running the television for college basketball March Madness is probably the most elite programmer in all of the country because,
That's
I mean,
Mhm.
they time it to where this game ends, you're in the last 5 minutes of this
Yep.
game. As soon as that one ends, you're in the last 5 minutes of this game. And then you get like a window of like in the first couple of days, just like 8 games where you're catching the ending of all of them. You can watch all the ends. And then obviously there's that reset where you have all the start of the new games. But then like dominoes, man, it's just an ending.
It's the best.
Yeah.
And like you can watch them all. It's
Mhm.
elite.
It's a good time for sure. But this is also an exciting time of year for the NFL. If you are kind of a nerd when it comes to like the NFL or college football players going to the NFL, that draft is such a like strategic time of year. And we got free agency coming up. We're seeing all of these, trades that are about to be processed when the official league year starts on Wednesday. We've seen a bunch of that kind of stuff right now. Let's go ahead and jump straight into, I've got in front of me like Todd McShay's updated mock draft based on the trade with the Panthers and Bears being in place. And number 1 overall is Bryce Young going to the Panthers to start that off. Is anybody surprised by that? I know
Yes,
we talked
actually.
about CJ Stroud potentially being a guy that might go in that trade scenario between a few of us. So are we still surprised that Todd thinks it's going to be Bryce Young? Jonathan, you've been vocal, so go ahead.
Yeah, I actually was surprised to see that Bryce Young still remains as the favorite, or no, he's not even the favorite anymore. I think Stroud has now emerged as an odds-on favorite to be the number 1 overall pick. So I was surprised a little bit to see that Todd McShay is still rolling with Bryce Young because I've also seen reports out that Carolina really loves CJ Stroud, and then the other guy that they really love is Anthony Richardson. Now, in my opinion, if you're trading up to the number 1 overall pick to go get Anthony Richardson, you just wasted all of that capital that you shifted over to Chicago to go get him because you don't need to draft, you don't need to trade up to number 1 overall pick to get Anthony Richardson, in my opinion. Now there may be other buzz in the NFL scheme of things between GMs, and there's a different belief there, but from my knowledge and what I see,
Todd has him going number 4 overall to the Colts right now.
Yeah, exactly. So I
number
don't
1.
think you had
And
to jump.
that's the third quarterback off the board, so that means that he's not. Yeah, I'm with you.
I think CJ Stroud would be an excellent pick for Carolina. I think CJ Stroud is the best quarterback in this class, in my opinion. I just think he has it all. He to me has the best NFL package for a quarterback with the stature, the size, the arm, the IQ. He has it all, in my opinion. So I think he is the best quarterback in this class, and I think he is very much worthy of going number 1 overall. I think that'd be a great pick for Carolina. But I will say, what they shipped over to Chicago to get that number 1 overall pick, that was a great decision by Chicago because Chicago got a weapon for Justin Fields, which they have desperately needed. That has been a huge criticism of Chicago.
DJ Moore.
You got more draft capital to work with a team that's trying to rebuild a little bit and get those final pieces. That's exactly what you need. And for a team that doesn't necessarily need the number 1 overall pick, a team that looks like they're probably going to be looking for the defensive side of things in this draft, then yeah, absolutely. If that's what Carolina is going to offer you, then you absolutely take that. So I think that was a great job by Chicago.
So they got DJ Moore, and didn't they get, was it 3 or 4 picks? I know they got 2 first-round picks and a second-round pick for like a couple years.
They got the number 1 this year. They got the number 1 this year, the number 1 next year. They got the number 2 this year, number 2 next year. So they got 4 picks total.
They got 4 picks.
But really it's 3 if you think about it because you're swapping picks. So you don't get that pick. You just keep a pick. And they stayed in the top 10. True. And that's the most important thing is they stayed in the top 10. Like, I don't mind a team moving back to get capital because I'm all about that. But you have to make sure that you're going to stay high enough in the draft where you can be relevant enough to go get an impact player. And Chicago's able to do that.
And you got DJ Moore, man. That's huge.
Of course. But I'm just saying, you want to make sure that you're able to capitalize on that draft pick. So,
yes.
You said that you felt like CJ Stroud was the best quarterback. You know who else agrees with you is Dane. Oh my gosh, what's his name? Dane Brugler from the Athletic. Sorry, I apologize. Okay. So he has the Carolina Panthers taking CJ Stroud number 1, and number 2 in his draft he has the Houston Texans taking Bryce Young, which is obviously whatever. Now he does throw in a wrinkle, and I like this. This makes a lot of sense. Okay, his wrinkle is he has Baltimore trading up to number 4 with Indianapolis, taking Indianapolis's draft pick. And are they swapping first-round picks? No, they are not. The Colts would be getting Lamar Jackson. And then he has them taking Anthony Richardson, who they feel like is a clone of Lamar Jackson. I don't agree with that, but that's what they think. That would be
I
really
definitely
interesting.
disagree with that.
That would be very interesting. That would give I don't know if Indianapolis would do that, but Baltimore gets to keep the first round pick. They get out of cap nightmare scenario with Lamar Jackson, and they get a quarterback, and then now they can take that's the first person I've ever seen throw that out there.
Mm-hmm.
That's not horrible, guys. That's not.
But that
horrible.
seems real complicated though, because right now you've got Lamar Jackson, who is he's being franchise tag. It's unrestricted franchise tag, meaning that he's allowed to continue to negotiate with other teams. Other teams are allowed to take him at this point in time. So like to trade a guy, if I am the Colts and I'm making that trade and I'm getting Lamar Jackson, you got to make sure you can re-sign the guy, because like
that's how it works. So what would work is, because remember the way they structured this, they did not put the franchise tag on them. So other teams are allowed to negotiate
the unrestricted franchise tag.
Right. So the Colts would structure that contract. They would sign them to the contract. They would give them the third round pick, the number 4 pick, and then Baltimore would not match that contract and allow him to go there. And that's how that trade would work. And I mean, listen, if that's how this plays out, that's brilliant. I like to fancy myself an NFL first round GM. I never in a million years would have come up with that shit. So that's brilliant. And I mean, Anthony Richardson, whether we like him or not, that's not terrible. You could come away with a lot worse scenario. And they have that whole offense set up for somebody with that skill set. And a lot of times we make the argument that quarterbacks don't succeed because of the fit, right? Of where they go. And Baltimore is not a bottom feeder team. So now you have a quarterback.
Team. Yeah.
Quarterback with skills going into a medi-rate situation. That might not be bad, boys.
Well, I think too would be really beneficial for Baltimore in that instance is, something that's kind of talked about in this league. And we kind of saw it a little bit today with the LA Rams shipping off Jalen Ramsey over to Miami is when you have these players that are without a doubt really, really good. They are top percenters at their position in the league. Like Atlanta got into this with Matt Ryan and Julio Jones, is finding that time when it's time to move on, but doing it before their contract runs out so you can still get something out of them. Kind of like when their ceiling's still really high, Matt Ryan still has value, or Julio Jones still has value, or Jalen Ramsey still has value in this instance, which I still think Miami got a heck of a deal on that instance. But you're not just letting them walk away, or you're not just having to release them and now you're stuck getting nothing in return and you're still having to pay this contract or whatever. Baltimore in this instance, in that scenario, would be getting something out of Lamar Jackson. They're not just having to watch him walk away for nothing, and they would get a higher draft pick where they can try and replace a Lamar Jackson. They get some value, at least something out of Lamar Jackson being on their team. Whereas in a lot of instances, like I said, with Atlanta, where they ran into it with Julio Jones and Matt Ryan, is there were so many times where it felt like, okay, it might be time where we just need to really shop the market, see what's out there, and just go ahead and bite the bullet now and say our goodbyes now, as opposed to later when it's really going to suck, when we just don't get anything and we just have to watch them walk away. So that would be a really good move for Baltimore for that, from that perspective.
And, so I'm reading this as you're talking. It says that the Ravens would get 2 first-round picks. It would get this year and next year. So not only this, they're coming away with that, but it says that the Ravens have no problem with Huntley taking over as the starting quarterback because he filled in admirably last year, and that would allow Richardson to be able to be groomed a little bit and find his way and not have to be forced in day one. Listen, this is not something that was on my list of things to talk to when this show started, or I would have at least given you a heads up. But I saw it as we started the show, and guys, that's not bad. And I think
if I'm Baltimore, I think that's a great job. Now, as far as the Colts go, do I think it's great for them? I mean, we'll see how that's iffy.
I don't think
because they lose 2 first-round picks and they get Lamar Jackson, who I think is a top-tier quarterback in the NFL. But the problem with Lamar Jackson that I have, and we talked about this so much in our text message, our group text, is the dude wants way too much money, and it's exactly what y'all are talking about and what Zach is talking about in the comments right now. For the Falcons, there's a reason that would I love to have Lamar Jackson play for the Falcons because I think he's a great quarterback? Absolutely. Do I want Lamar Jackson to come to Atlanta? Absolutely not, because he wants a $50 million contract, and that is 25% of your cap space to one player. The Falcons have a terrible defense. They have so many holes to fill. You just got out of cap space issues with Julio Jones and Matt Ryan, that you are finally free from both of those. And then you would just throw yourself right back into it by giving one player $50 million a year. That would absolutely kill your ability to build a roster with all of that cap space that you are going into this offseason with. So would it be terrible for Atlanta? I think so. I think that would be detrimental to where Atlanta would just not be able to be good for a while again. But so that's what I worry about for the Colts in that trade. That's why I don't know if it'd be good for them, because can they build around him at that point? How much money are they going to sign him for? And does it work? For Baltimore, that's a beautiful pick, because you're probably going to lose Lamar Jackson anyways. That's the whole point, right? Everyone expects them to lose him. What do you get in return? 2 first-round picks, and one being the number 4 overall. Like that's phenomenal. That would be an incredible deal for Baltimore. Whether or not it happens, I feel like I doubt it. But it would be amazing for Baltimore if they could pull that off. But can we all agree on one thing? Outside of Bryce Young and CJ Stroud, there's no good quarterbacks in this draft.
Well, it's a lot of question marks. I don't know that I would say that there's not a lot of good quarterbacks. I think there are good quarterbacks,
uncertainty.
And there's a lot of uncertainty, and it's we're betting on ourselves to be able to develop this person into what we think they are capable of. But how often does that typically work out? Like, how often do we see those, project pieces actually pan out to the way that everybody hopes that they do? Like, Anthony Richardson, without a doubt, has all the tools in the world to be successful in the NFL.
He's a physical specimen. He is.
But what he had issues with at Florida, like accuracy with short-range throws, like slants and whatnot, things like that, football IQ, not turning the ball over, those are the things you have to work with. Same thing with Will Levis. Will Levis has all the tools in the world to be successful in the NFL, but he was very careless with the football. His IQ, his decision-making was very questionable. His accuracy was questionable sometimes. So it's all about, how do you think you are going to be able to? Now, everybody, of course, every team probably thinks that they have the guy. Everybody thinks that they have the guy to make Anthony Richardson the number 1 quarterback in the NFL in 5 years. Everybody thinks that they can take Will Levis and turn him into the next Josh Allen or whatever you want to say he is. So you just have to be careful, though, and know, because I think teams that need a quarterback, I do think that in my opinion, at least for this class, especially knowing what's in the future with like a Caleb Williams, a Drake May, and those sort of names being thrown out there, maybe even a Carson Beck out of Georgia, is there has to be a line that you have to draw at some point. Like when these names are gone, we're drawing the line, we're looking elsewhere, and we're going to focus elsewhere, and we're just going to rock with the team we got and see what we can make shake. And if we end up in the top 10 again next year, we can make something else happen probably with next year's quarterback class, because I like next year's class a lot more than I do this year's.
Yeah, I think CJ Stroud has an opportunity to be really good. I always like to bring up the Ohio State quarterback in the NFL history that has a winning record. There's not one. There's not one Ohio State quarterback ever in the history of NFL with a winning record. That's, first of all, that just blows my damn mind. I mean, that just seems impossible, right? But one thing doesn't always have the same, have to do with the other. I think CJ Stroud has a real opportunity. If you look at the other 3 quarterbacks, I know everybody's leaning on Bryce Young being an elite quarterback. I think he's way too small. I think he'll have highlight days. I think he'll have Kyler Murray days where he goes off. And then I have other days where he's going to be a disaster. And I think he's way too light. I think he's going to get hurt. I could be 100% wrong. He might be the best quarterback in the history of the NFL. I don't know. But like you said, Jonathan, question mark. Big question mark for me. He's just his size. He's too little. Stetson's bigger. And everybody says Stetson can't play quarterback because he's too little. So if he's too little, Bryce is too little. So throw him out. Now with the Will Levis, I understand why people like him. He's got a big, strong arm.
Well, he's 6'5" and the big dude. He's got the NFL measurables. That's what they care about.
Well, so does AR.
Exactly.
If you look at Anthony Richardson's highlight tape, and listen, I know how dangerous those things can be. That's false advertising on top of false advertising. I get it. But damn, he looks good on some of those highlight tapes. And I hate Florida, and I hate Anthony Richardson and anything associated with Florida. But when I watch this highlight tape, there's a lot to get excited about. And the only reason I say that is because I think somebody is going to fall in love with that tape. And I think he's going to have a shot to go really high. And if he goes into a situation where it's a ready-made situation and he doesn't have to carry a team, I think he could be really successful. So, but you're right. Outside of that, I don't know that there's a lot of guys that I would even take a flyer on. However, when I was doing that crazy mock draft that had you guys up in arms, I
was just messing with you on that. I thought it was fun.
Late in the draft, there was a name that showed up on there that I completely forgot about, which is Malik Cunningham out of Louisville. listen, poor man's Lamar Jackson, maybe. But listen, if you're talking about late in the draft, 6th or 7th round, how often do somebody make the team in the 6th and 7th round? And if you need a quarterback that not necessarily has to play right now, I don't see a whole lot of danger in taking a guy like Malik Cunningham, putting him on the back end of your roster, and just saying, "Hey, kid, show me what you can do for the next 2 years." I mean, I did watch some of his games at Louisville, and there were times where I was like, "Damn, he looks like Lamar," and then there were other times I'm like, "No, he doesn't."
Look, I will unfortunately admit that I probably watched way too many Louisville football games this past season because
hold on,
I placed quite a few player. I placed quite a few player
Jonathan
prop
kicks
bets.
me in the nuts.
No. I placed quite a few player prop bets on Malik Cunningham this past year because they were always just a little too favorable, in my opinion. So, yes, I was the guy on Thursday night watching Louisville versus UCF or whatever you have it. And I too was every time I watched Malik Cunningham, I was like, look, I get he plays at Louisville. He's maybe not going against the top competition, whatever. And I was pretty sure he's very athletic. Of course, that's how they used him. They molded that offense around him to be able to use his legs and whatnot. So I think that he's definitely a guy that if you want to take him in the 4th round or you want to take him in the 5th round, absolutely. If that's kind of the direction you want to go with him, and it's just like, we're going to use a draft pick on you. Whether you pan out or not is fine. We're not putting all of our eggs into that basket. But he very well could be that player that's on your bench for a couple of years, and then when it comes time to he's a 3rd-year player in the NFL, you're like, holy crap, we don't have a quarterback issue anymore now that so-and-so's contract is up. I think we have a legitimate shot of making Malik Cunningham our substitution. Or if your guy goes down hurt, maybe you're not scratching and clawing, looking in the free agency market, trying to sign someone for 2 weeks because your quarterback went down for the next month or whatever. Maybe he does turn into that. So I think, yeah, like a mid-round draft pick or something like that, for sure. I liked Malik Cunningham at Louisville. I don't know if he gave me shades of Lamar Jackson necessarily, but definitely one of those guys that just kind of stood out like, wow, this guy just makes plays. That's what he does.
I think it's just because of the way they used him, and it was the Louisville. I think when you're watching him, you're kind of like, oh, I could see some athleticism that Lamar had.
Lamar comparisons, he's at Louisville running the same type of offense.
Yeah. Fair.
That's the comparison that we're making right now. Like, let's not get lost on that. But
all right. So, in every single mock draft so far that I've seen, they've got Chicago taking Peter Skoronski, or however you say his name, the big
Skoronski, the offensive lineman,
the big massive lineman from Northwestern. I didn't really know who he was coming into this year because they remember, when they do the way too early mock drafts, they had him going to the top 10 last year, and I didn't know who he was. And I talked to a lot of my friends who live up north, and they're all Big Ten guys, and they were like, "Oh no, this guy is legit. He's every bit whatever." So pretty much everybody has him going to the Bears. I think that's a great pick for them. I was telling you guys earlier in our group chat, I really wish the Falcons would pull the trigger on an offensive line, just plug and play. I mean, listen, they screwed themselves by not giving – it's McGarry, right? That's the one that they didn't do the 5th-year option. And now he gets to walk, and he graded out as the number 1 tackle or guard or whatever the hell he plays. And now he's gone. So now you have to replace him. I think that would be a massive piece. But in this Dane Brugler from the Athletic thing, he's got the Falcons taking Tyree Wilson. And if I'm not mistaken, that's the guy that you like a lot, Jonathan, right?
I like Tyree Wilson a good bit. I don't know that he's going to be available when
Todd
Atlanta
McShay
picks.
has him going 5 to Seattle.
Yeah, so it's just so touch and go though, because you just really don't know. Like, with mock drafts too, it's a shot in the dark. It's a crapshoot. Nobody actually knows what is, aside from maybe the first 3 picks. Those are maybe the only ones where you can say like, good. I can say with a 60% chance this pick is actually going to happen. After that, who the heck knows what's going to happen? Because, sometimes Jalen Carter's up there at 5 with the Seahawks. And then other times Tyree Wilson is falling out of the top 12, or Nolan Smith is at 8 with the Atlanta Falcons, or Broderick Jones is sneaking up to the top 10. So you really just don't know. I do like Tyree Wilson. If that's the direction the Falcons want to go, if that's who they pick, absolutely. You need edge rushers. Tyree Wilson is a really good edge rusher. He flashes a lot on tape. I really like him a lot. I believe our guy Harrison pointed out that his bull rush, or maybe that was Van Ness. I can't remember.
That was Van Ness.
Yeah.
Van Ness.
He's
Tyree Wilson for sure.
That was good.
Tyree Wilson for sure is a pick that I like a lot, and I just don't know if he's going to be available when Atlanta's turn is. But if he is, that's a really solid pick.
So with that though, hold on. Like with that though, so that was the discussion we were having the other day, even with Harrison. We were talking about that number 8 draft pick for the Falcons, and one of the draft picks.
Lift up the curtain.
Let's go ahead. This is where Dan got real mad because Dan
Well,
saw
I wasn't mad.
You
But
got
Harrison
mad.
thought I was mad.
No, you got mad. But you because they had the Falcons. I don't remember what mock draft you saw, but
Hold
they had
on.
I think it was the Fox.
These freaking two like to team up on people. That's their game.
Whoa. No, look, honestly, like you may think that Jeremiah and are over here like side texting, scheming, like, oh yeah,
No.
let's pin this against Dan. We're team.
No.
No, Jeremiah and I, whether it's unfortunate or fortunate, I don't know, are just very, very like-minded. And maybe that's why we butt heads on so many other stupid things, because we are so like-minded. I don't know. But we genuinely just tend to think quite the same on a lot of topics. That's just how it is.
Sports,
we're not tag teaming on you, brother.
All right. So my whole thing is I don't like taking flyers. And listen, I think part of this in all transparency, part of this is I have been conditioned as a Falcon fan to understand, and I'm sure other teams do this a lot too, but they're not my team, so I don't follow them that closely. However, in so many times in my lifetime, the Falcons are trying to be the smartest guy in the room, and they want to take a flyer on a guy that nobody else wants to take as high as they want to, right? So this one mock draft had the Falcons taking Van Ness. Now, he doesn't go that high in anybody else's mock draft, but he does with the Falcons. If the Falcons really feel like he's the guy and they want to be able to move back and take him, I have no issue. My problem is at the number 8 spot, and this is what I was telling you, Jeremiah, is that anything in the top 10, I feel like you don't have room to miss it. And a great GM is great at 15 through 32 and then on throughout the draft, right? He can nail those picks. Anytime Dick or Harry should be able to nail a top 10 and pick an NFL draft because it's not that hard. I want a known quantity. I don't want to take a guy who might be great. Hell, he might be the next Joey Bosa. I don't know, but he could be the next Joey Johnson. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. I want a sure thing. Like, and then Jonathan kind of came at me with the Nolan Smith thing, saying that because I had made the point that after 2 years of Nolan Smith being at Georgia and being the number one player in the country, a lot of people were saying that he wasn't the number one player. He was a bust, blah, blah, blah. My attitude on him changed significantly when Kirby came out last year, which is the first time he's done it pre-draft, where he came out and said, don't judge my guys on numbers because I'm asking them to do different things. Watch the tape. Watch what I will tell you what they're asked to do. Watch them do it. They are executing what I ask perfectly. So my attitude on Nolan Smith is maybe he is that player and maybe he has that ability. So if he were to go in the top 10, but my thing is number one player in the country, played at the University of Georgia, coached by Kirby Smart. Can I take a flyer on him? I will give him much more leeway than I will a player who is at Iowa, who's playing, who hasn't recruited in the top 50 in 25 effing years. Like who am I going to give more credit to? Georgia or Iowa? Georgia every time. And that's not because
I think the problem comes out in this. It's not like I think the biggest issue on it is the fact that Nolan Smith didn't get to play half the season. And that's the part that hurts him, because had he gotten to finish the season, I think his name would be solidified as a top 10 pick. I don't think it would be a discussion where we're sitting here talking about whether or not he should be taken at 8 on this. In the defense of Van Ness, the guy, even though he was at Iowa, which is, it's a Big Ten school. It's not like he's playing on an FCS team or something like that. He is playing decent competition. He plays against Michigan, who was rated as the best offensive line, whether or not we agree with that because Georgia had a really good offensive line or not. But the point is they at least had a top 5 offensive line, right? Like, I don't think anybody's arguing that. So even in that game, he's making plays. He's getting quarterback pressures and stuff. The guy finished the season with 9 sacks and 31 quarterback pressures. That's where I say, like, if the Falcons think they have something there, I don't know that I'm the person to be able to say I disagree with you, because I don't do as much film study as they would have done. I have watched some of his stuff, not a lot. And I've watched some since this conversation of it. And the dude does have a really good pass rush, or bull rush in general. But 9 sacks in the Big Ten is still good. It's still a good season. 31 quarterback pressures is still a good number as well. So he definitely has flashes and abilities. Now, other people, that was, I think, a Fox Sports like mock draft or something.
Right.
Nobody else. I haven't seen. So whether or not that's real or not, because like when we go to Todd McShay does have Nolan Smith being taken at number 8 overall to the Falcons. So I don't know what's going to happen, but my whole point in that conversation was, who am I to say that they would be taking a flyer necessarily? They might he's playing at a Big Ten school. It's a good school, a good team overall. They had one of the best defenses in the country last year. And so it's not like you're taking a scrub from somewhere. Like he's definitely done enough to solidify himself as maybe a first round draft pick. Whether or not he's a top 10 pick, I don't know. That's not my job. So that was my whole point of the conversation.
Yeah, my whole thing was just, my circle of knowing prospects and knowing who's good is very, very small, if you will say. When you're looking at it from the grand scheme of college football, I cover Georgia football for Dogs Daily at Sports Illustrated. That is what I do. So I can tell you what Nolan Smith does really well, or what Stetson Bennett does really well, or even what Hendon Hooker does really well at Tennessee, or Anthony Richardson at Florida, or anybody else in the SEC, really. But I can't tell you what Van Ness does really well, because you will not catch me being the sociopath watching Iowa football just for the heck of it on Saturday.
Big Ten football.
You will
Big
not
Ten
catch
football
me
on a
doing
Saturday.
That.
Ooh.
Or am I spending my off-season time watching Van Ness's
Those
Iowa
offenses
tape?
are
What I do know,
dog
though,
water.
what I do know about Iowa, though, is that they were a top 5 ranked defense this past year. I do know that much. And whether you want to say that's because of who they're playing, who their strength of opponent is, yada, 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 whatever, bottom line, they finished as top 5 defense statistically, which holds a lot of merit, if you ask me, when you're putting it up against 130 some odd teams, So I can't tell you for sure if I think Van Ness would be good or not, because I don't know. I have not sat there and watched Van Ness. So that's why my whole thing was, I'm not going to be the guy that on draft night is going to jump to a conclusion to say that that's a bad pick when I honestly don't freaking know. I haven't done my homework to know that or not. So that's why I always say, give it a year or two. Let's see the guy play. And if we want to be the person that says that Van Ness did not pan out, I'll be that guy, because I'll be able to have watched him against NFL talent and watch him every week. So I'll have more, knowledge on the subject, if you want to say.
I just, look, with me, it is my personal preference. Like I said, probably years of me getting burned as being a Falcons fan.
Yeah.
Is that I want a known quantity in the top 10. And if you really feel like Van Ness is the guy that you want, if you look at all the other mock drafts, and again, like you said, total crapshoot. Other teams might have him in their top 5. Who knows? We might have him as the best player on the board. So
Yeah.
You may not be able to move back and get him. But I'm just saying there are many times in Falcons draft history where they got a guy who, whether good or not, they could have gotten later. And that's my point. And to your point earlier, Jeremiah, about the Bears maybe making a great move because they got more draft capital. This is a team with the Falcons, and we were kind of covering that earlier today, has a million different holes to fill.
Yes.
And if you can get more draft capital and still get the guy that you want, I'm down for it. If the Falcons were to move back to 12,
that would be a good move.
Pick up a second or a third and then get Van Ness, I would support the move, whether he pans out or not. That's it. That's all.
I would agree with that. I really would agree with that, because if you can make that pick work for you and get more off of it, and if that's the guy you really want, because once again, I don't think he's going top 10. I think that was one mock draft, and I don't think he's actually going top 10. So, but if that is the guy that the Falcons really want, you're right, Dan. That would be perfect. Drop back a couple picks and get him at 12 or whatnot, and then you get a couple more picks in return. I would be okay with that.
Perfect.
I think the 4 Wide podcast just turned into bro-friend therapy there for a little bit. We just hashed it out. We had a healthy conversation. We got to the root of the problem. Everybody got their turn to speak their 2 cents. And now look, we walk away understanding each other, knowing, getting new perspective.
That's right.
Hey, well, let's get into a new topic that gets people just equally excited and upset and fired up, and that is the bracket challenge, right? Everybody all of a sudden, and where was it? Somebody today, was it Brooks? Maybe somebody put out a tweet that said, "Get ready in the next couple of minutes. All these people who have not watched college basketball all year become draft experts or bracket experts." And hey, let's jump right in and let's be those guys.
Well, first thing I'll say is, again, I'm very much I'm not going to be that guy to say well, I'll go ahead and tell you that Illinois is not going to make it past the first round. I have not watched Illinois. Again, my circle is very tight. I watch SEC basketball for the most part because, that's the team that I cover. So I'm going to watch Georgia. I'll watch who Georgia plays. But I fully indulged in championship weekend for conference brackets and whatnot. I watched 6 different games. Again, mostly SEC, but I watched Duke and UNC playing one night. I also watched Kansas and Texas. Really like Texas a lot. I came away very impressed with them. Kansas could not do anything against Texas's defense. So I was really impressed with that. But this is what makes March Madness so fun is while everybody wants to act like they know what's going on, everybody wants to know like they can sniff out the upsets. Like, oh yeah, like when it hits, when they're upset on the first day of March Madness hits, like, yep, I told you, I knew it, I studied, and I could have saw it. Nobody freaking knows. That's what the fun part is. You are purely guessing. Like some people want to do it on logos. Some might do it because they got cool jerseys. Everybody has their own different method, or you're just probably like Jeremiah. We're just like, yep, click, 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 done. That's basically what I'll do. You know.
No, so that's not how that goes for me.
But that's the fun of it, though, Jeremiah. I'm not picking on you. I'm just saying that everybody has their own method to their madness. And there's no right way because your way that year might actually pan out for you. And it might actually end up being the 95% correct bracket in the winter and you come away with a big chunk of change. You know, that's what's so great about March Madness is nobody freaking knows. And just like we say, every given Saturday, you're a week away from humility, as Kirby Smart says. Well, you're a day away from humility in March Madness. Just guess how UMBC ran through March Madness a couple years ago or, you know, every single year. There's just a Cinderella team and nobody knows who it's going to be.
Yeah.
Nobody knows who it's going to be, but it's always fun to watch them.
Well, a long time ago when when Gonzaga had their first real deep run in the tournament before anybody really knew who Gonzaga was, my wife picked Gonzaga all the way through the tournament because she thought that was a really fun name. And then she just got lucky and she ended up being like in the top 10% of the entire country. And we were in a bracket with a bunch of friends. I used to work for a media company. And that media company sends them all out. So there's over 1,000 people that play in this pool. And Allison like finished third and won like $800 or $900 in this thing. And I'm like, you gotta be shitting me. But you're absolutely right. And you know, there's two things that are true, right? If you have an extremely athletic team that is extremely defensively active and they can score in transition, those teams have a chance to play and win every single night, right? But then the flyer to that, the caveat to that is if you have a three-point shooting team that can put together a good weekend or 2 weekends, they can beat any team in the country. And that's how most of these upsets happen. You have a team that gets extremely hot from the perimeter. Now, Duke used to be a really fundamental team back in the Christian Laettner, Bobby Hurley team, and they could beat you any different way. However, like once the 2000s hit, Duke turned into a three-point shooting team. And a lot of times Duke might be the best team in the country. However, they don't win because they go cold. And if you're a three-point shooting team and you have a cold night, anybody can beat you. Like this Duke team this year, for example, and I'm talking about Duke because that's the team I watch the most. They had the most talented team in the country. They had arguably one of the best recruiting classes in the history of recruiting. However, 2 of the 3 players that they got, number 1, number 2, and number 4, number 1 and number 2 have been hurt all year long. But guess who's healthy right now? And guess who just won the ACC championship? That is a team that has been getting shit on all year long because nobody paid attention to why they weren't any good. Now they're really good, but they do live and die on the 3, so they could be put out quickly.
Well, and they're also a 5 seed. Duke is a 5 seed playing Oral Roberts. So that 12 seed. Listen, one thing I do know about the bracket is every single year, at least 2 of those 12 seeds are winning over a 5 seed there. And
there's some comeuppance or whatever I don't know how to freaking say that word, but there is something going on with those 5 total games every single year. There is something fishy about those. I don't know what it is, but there's always something fishy about those 5 total seeds. But Dan, I like your story about your wife having success in the March Madness bracket because I have my own story like that. I remember I was in middle school. Don't remember what grade, but I know I was 13 years old, and the Gwinnett Stripers did this massive March Madness bracket. They did this huge one. I think there was like over 250 people in this bracket thing, in this bracket challenge. And middle school me, I was like, heck yeah, I'll put my bracket in there. Well, at the end of it, I finished in second place. I didn't finish in first. And the only reason I did not come in first is because it came down to the tiebreaker score decision, and the other guy got a closer score than I did, so he got first place. But I got second place and got 4 free tickets to a game in the summer of my choice and got to throw out the first pitch. So that just goes ahead and tell you, if a 13-year-old can go out there and defeat 249 people in a bracket challenge, it's just luck of the draw. Who made the right decision or who just freaking pressed the right button?
Man, the whole point about like March Madness that makes it so good for everybody to watch is it literally can be any given team that can make a huge run
who's
or
got
upset
Jimmy
like the
buckets for
biggest.
that the weekend?
Yeah,
that weekend.
exactly. Like you don't know which team is going to get hot at the right time. And basketball is one of those things that, like, if you start hitting buckets, man, I mean, it is what it is. Like it's that straightforward. It's kind of like baseball, where like you can go through the baseball tournament or season, right? And you might be the number one team in your league, in your division, and everything like that. But all of a sudden, a team that let's use the MLB for instance. You might get a wild card team that goes and wins a World Series because a wild card team who barely makes the playoffs all of a sudden gets hot at the right time, and their guys are hitting like crazy, and their pitchers are only allowing 1 or 2 runs a game all of a sudden. Then they go on a run. Same thing can happen in basketball and March Madness, especially because, like Dan was talking about, if you live by the three, if those threes are hitting for a few games, man, you will absolutely light it up and score a ton of points, and it's hard to lose.
Well, there's this saying in basketball of you do not want to peak too early. This goes in a lot of sports, not just basketball, but it's said a lot in basketball is you do not want to peak too early. You do not want to be playing your best basketball in the middle of the season, which I think this is something that Tennessee's kind of fallen victim to, but someone like Duke has kind of benefited from a lot as of late is
right.
You want to be playing your best basketball a few weeks before March Madness or the week before March Madness. You want to find your groove and hit your peak right as March Madness is rolling around, because Tennessee looked like world beaters in the middle of college basketball season. Everybody was saying they were the number one team in the nation at one point. Well, now at this point in the season, they've lost 4 of their last 7, still going to March Madness, still dancing, still one of the better teams probably in the country. But you're not rolling in there with momentum like Duke. You're not rolling in there with momentum like someone like Alabama, who is really good. But even them really didn't peak until the end of the season, where now they have Brandon Miller, who's been going off every single year. They got Javon Quinterly. The threes have been falling for them. You got to peak at the right moment. And I think that happens a lot of times. And that's why you see so many upsets. It's like when in these lower conferences, whatever you want to call them, teams like Oral Roberts or St. Peter's a year ago, is when they find their groove in that conference, all of a sudden anybody that plays them is in danger, because whether you want to overlook them or not, that team is rolling in there with a lot of momentum, and basketball is a huge momentum game. I mean, there is momentum swings constantly, and whoever catches the momentum and is able to just ride that wave, that's who's going to win the basketball game. Basketball is a game of runs, a game of momentum, and that's what it's all about. And so if you have the momentum, then you're going to be favored in that game, and you're probably going to end up winning that game.
Well, and the other thing to look for is a lot of those small schools that can make the deep run. They have a junior, senior laden roster, where most of your powerhouse teams, your North Carolina, Duke, Kentucky, they're all freshmen and sophomores. And they're, the guys who are juniors and seniors on that team are not any good. Well, a lot of times those guys that are juniors and seniors at like Oral Roberts or NBCU or whoever, NBC China, I don't know, whatever. A lot of those guys, they're guys who got overlooked. They didn't develop right away. And then all of a sudden, their junior and senior year, they turn into superstars that could be and would play at one of these bigger universities. However, it just took them a while to develop. And that's why when you have Northern Illinois, or what's the school from Illinois that went deep with St.
Loyola Chicago.
Yeah, and then the Sister Jean. Is that Sister Jean?
Mm-hmm. That's Sister Jean.
That was a senior-laden team. Those guys have been playing together for 4 years at the college level. When that happens, that's very, very – Jonathan, you know as well as I do. I played basketball. That was my primary sport. I loved basketball. When you have a lot of experience with a group and you've played together with a group, like these AAU teams, some of these teams, they play with their school, right? And they'll start playing 4th or 5th grade, like Habersham. Habersham has a team that was all freshmen this year. That group has played together since 3rd grade. They've only played with each other. They didn't go anywhere else. Dude, they can beat shoe teams, and because they're so good at playing together. And that's like a lot of these teams, man. They have a chemistry, and it's just those teams are tough to beat. That's what you got to look for. But at the end of the day, like you said, it's a crapshoot. You can know a lot, and sometimes that can get you in trouble. And then other times you just have to, I always ride Duke to the finals. So if Duke's going to go to the finals, guess who's going to do well in the bracket? This guy. But just for shits and giggles, my Final Four, I've got Alabama, Duke, Houston, and UCLA. I've got Alabama, UCLA playing for the title, and I got Alabama winning. And I think that's probably going to be, other than Duke, I think a lot of people are going to have Purdue coming out. But I think Alabama and UCLA are probably going to be a very heavy duo in the finals.
Alabama's officially a basketball school. How about that? Wow. The tides have officially turned, if you will.
Pun intended on that one.
A little bit, we'll say no,
Hey,
but yeah, basically.
On the conversation about basketball being about runs and stuff too, Zach makes a really point. You got Kennesaw State coming in with a lot of momentum right now, winning their conference and punching their ticket to go dancing. They are starting as a 14 seed, and they do have to play against Xavier to start the tournament, which is a very, very tough matchup for them. But if they could somehow get through that, talk about momentum for them. Wow, that would be something.
For sure, that's a big deal for Kennesaw.
It's definitely going to be exciting to watch how all this plays out for sure. Dan, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, we had talked about Georgia Tech letting Josh Pastner go, and the head coach at Kennesaw State, his name is right there at the top of the list of somebody that they would be looking for. It's hard. It'd be hard to argue that Georgia Tech's a better job right at this moment. Obviously, it can be a better job. Growing up, Georgia Tech, I liked Georgia football, Georgia Tech basketball growing up before somebody told me I wasn't allowed to do that. Georgia Tech basketball in the 90s, dude, was that was must-see TV. They had a pipeline running straight up to Coney Island, and Bobby Crimmins was making that thing work. Lethal Weapon 3, but I had that poster on my wall. That was real deal basketball, and it could be that again.
For sure.
Yeah,
absolutely.
We'll see how it all plays out. I'm excited to watch March Madness. Like you guys know, I'm not the biggest basketball person in this group. I do watch basketball, and I do enjoy it overall. This is when I really get into it myself, and I will sit there, like Jonathan was saying, noon to midnight. You got games going on, and I'm watching, 90% of that. I've got it on in the background while I'm doing work and stuff like that, and it's on the TV all day long, and I enjoy it. So I'm excited to see how that plays out. I will make my bracket. We'll see what happens with it and see if I get lucky on that. Let's do a little bit of talk about some baseball real quick before we wrap it up. We're already 46 minutes into the show, so we won't go too long on this. But World Baseball Classic's going on. Spring training's going on. A lot of stuff. Baseball season is just around the corner in April. Let's jump straight into it. Who wants to go first? I'll let y'all decide.
I just have really one thing that I want to say about the World Baseball Classic and why I wish it was a little more regular. This is not something that they do every single year, or really two things I want to say. One thing that I love about it is that it's really cool to see all of these guys that probably would never play together get to play together, like seeing Mike Trout, Trey Turner, Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado, all of those guys on the same team, and watching what basically a USA Dream basketball team looks like on the baseball field, getting to watch that and see how that plays out. I think that's a lot of fun. And then also maybe Mike Trout will finally get to win something significant in his baseball career because he's been so loyal to the freaking Los Angeles Angels.
He just played against the A's and they threw it high and tight on the boy. So he almost got hit with a pitch to the chin playing against his own team.
But the other thing is, I don't know if you guys watch, I believe it's Venezuela versus the Dominican Republic. But they were doing everything that all of the unwritten rules of baseball say that you are not supposed to. It was like watching it was like watching the World Cup of soccer. Every single kick, every single pass, every single second of that game felt like the biggest moment of the game. Every single strikeout, every single bloop single, whatever it was, the fans were hyped up about it. The players were stoked about everything. You had guys, a pitcher struck out a guy, and he's literally beating his chest on the mound, doing everything that you technically, all the old sayers, the naysayers say that you are not supposed to do in baseball. It is now allowed, and you get this full-on exposure of what baseball could be and what baseball is being restricted in the MLB. Huh?
It's more exciting, isn't it?
Yes, it's beautiful. It's so much
more fun to watch. It's fun to be a part of. And those players, I bet, have so much more fun doing it too.
Well, there's a pride. There's a pride to it that doesn't exist in an all-star game. You basically have all-star rosters where guys show up and they play, and obviously they want to play well. They don't want to get embarrassed. But now you add the country onto it. And for these guys, we always talk about the World Cup, whether you like soccer or not. The World Cup is must-see TV because of the passion.
It's fun to watch.
And all that. But so right now you have Puerto Rico playing Venezuela. I think Puerto Rico is a very good team. Venezuela is kicking their ass right now. It's 7-1 right now. Your boy Acuna struck out with 2 on, and then Sal Perez, the catcher for the Royals, I believe he's still the catcher for the Royals.
Yeah,
he steps up and hits a 3-run shot right after that. So dude, I love the WBC. Obviously, baseball you get worried because not so much of the position players. I don't typically get worried about them, but I get worried about the pitchers, right? When you especially because they haven't really had time to ramp up. I'm afraid they're going to get used too much and get worn out. And
because it's spring training in baseball.
Yes.
And so you got pitchers out here throwing 7-8 innings in a game versus like right now, like they might pitch like an inning in a spring training game and be done.
I really wish the WBC was after the World Series, right? Because then that way, if there was an injury, it gives you plenty of time.
But I think too, you'd have a lot less people playing it at that point because
Yeah.
like a lot of your good players are probably going to end up being in the playoffs, and they're spent by that point. They played 162 plus games.
I think, yeah, and I think a lot of these players actually prefer it this way because, like, the thing that you're concerned about, I think a lot of these players enjoy it because it's a more competitive baseball game that gets them ready for the MLB season versus spring training, where it's like it's a game, but it's like who cares if you win or lose? There's not that like competitiveness that's going on outside of like a personal goal that they might have and stuff like that. You got starters that might only get like 2 at bats in a game or something like that at best. Versus like they get meaningful at bats where it's like game on the line. Like you're talking about, Acuna comes up in a situation like that. He doesn't get that type of feeling playing a spring training game. And so I think a lot of those players enjoy it. Now, I do agree with you though, as far as pitching goes. If I'm an organization, I'm concerned about my pitchers going and doing it. Position players, maybe not as much, but I am concerned about my pitchers throwing that much that early when you're trying to ease them back into it. But it is a competitive game that gets them ready for the season. I think that's why it's played now versus being played at the end of the season.
Well, and then the other thing that like the schedule, like they're not marketing this that well. Like you shouldn't have to find
baseball doesn't market worth shit. Okay, baseball is terrible.
Right.
I'm like MLB is so bad.
You're right. No, you're right. But then the other thing is Japan is 4-0. Okay, which I mean everybody knows Japan is going to be an elite team, right? Everybody knows that.
Yeah, they usually have a good baseball team.
USA's 1-0. How the hell is Japan play 4 games? The United States has only played 1, and they don't play again until. Oh, they played 10 o'clock tonight against Mexico. Looks like Dan's going to be staying up late to watch a little baseball. But, yeah, I mean, like, they're making it, and maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm just too old and I'm not in the swing, but it feels like to me that they're just making it too hard to watch, right? I mean, I want to watch this.
I believe, like,
game's
last
at 10
night's
o'clock,
game
though.
was
Who's going to watch that?
Like, for me, like last night's game was on Fox. So, like, it wasn't hard to find. You very much could have watched
like
USA
Fox
versus Britain. Yeah, it was Fox.
Yeah, but did you know that, or you just happened to come across it?
Well, I knew it because I looked it up because I wanted to watch it.
Oh, okay. Well,
but that's just me, though, man. You know.
But in general, baseball is back. I'm excited about it real quick. Let's take 2 minutes real quick because we're running out of time on the show. Let's just take a second to talk because we're talking spring training, right? And one thing that we were just talking about, this is what made me want to bring this up real quick, is we're talking about how exciting these games can be because you kind of get rid of some of the unwritten rules in baseball, and it gets people excited to watch. It gets the players more excited on the field, so there's more kind of like buzz around it. Well, that's what the MLB needs to focus on. Make the MLB get rid of the unwritten rules. Start getting pissed at players and stuff that are like enforcing unwritten rules and start throwing at people just because somebody bat flipped and stuff like that. And you'll get more exciting baseball that fans enjoy to watch. And what you don't have to do is start adding a freaking pitch clock that's going to be so problematic if they let this go based on what we've seen in spring training so far. Everybody in the world has seen that Braves game against Boston where they were in the 9th inning, tied 6-6, 2 outs, a full count, and bases loaded with the Braves up to bat. And guess what? We get a pitch count violation on the batter, and he strikes out. Game over. But that's not good. That's not entertaining. You're trying to speed the game up. You literally just end it at the most exciting part of the game, and that's not how you get people to watch. Let the players go out there and do what they want to do and enjoy it. Bat flip and pitchers pump their chest and maybe a second baseman turns a double play, gets to pump his fist real hard and get excited about it. Not have to worry about getting thrown at. That's going to give you more exciting baseball and maybe not speed up the game. But anyone that actually watches baseball and enjoys the game doesn't care if it takes an extra 15 minutes for the game to end because of pitch clock. Like that's not going to matter. I don't know how y'all feel, but that's my spiel.
No, I'm with you. Like I don't think the game. A guy who I met when I was umpiring, his name is Corey Aldridge, used to play for the Atlanta Braves. Played right field for the Braves. He is very opinionated about a lot of different things, and sometimes he just wants to argue, and he'll just argue with anything. But the one thing is, and he said is, you got people who hate baseball making decisions about baseball, and I agree with him 100% in that regard. And the one thing that I've always felt like, and I know this is over the top extreme, and just play it out in your mind, right? So pitcher gets his feelings hurt, he gets to take a baseball, which is hard as a rock, projectile, which most of them can throw above 90 miles an hour, and they get to use it as a weapon, hit you because they got their feelings hurt. Well, then just let the batter, when he gets his feeling, start take the bat and throw it at the pitcher, right? It's just the exact same thing. It's a project. I mean, but if a pitcher throws it at a batter, nothing happens to him. But if a batter throws a bat at the hitter, at the pitcher,
Ejection.
oh, he's going to jail.
Suspension. Yeah, all kinds of stuff.
But it's the same damn thing. So, like, I don't know. That's even as an umpire, that's the one thing that I maybe sometime got myself in a little trouble because
if you're throwing 60 miles an hour, maybe it's not such a big deal. You're throwing 95 and at somebody's shoulder, like that's dangerous, man. Like you're dealing with somebody's life at that point.
Well, if you hit him in the butt, it's not that big of a deal. But
yeah,
when you go, if you're anything above the waist,
you got rib cage, you got your elbow, your shoulder, and your head. Like all of that stuff could be very damaging to a player at that point. Like I've been hitting the elbow by a pitch that was probably only in the 80s, and when I tell you that was the most painful thing I've ever felt, I can't imagine getting that same pitch at like 95. It would probably break my arm. Like it was ridiculous.
Yeah,
like that's dangerous at that point.
I can show you some pictures of some of the balls that I took. When catcher gets crossed up, huh?
Yeah. All right, Jonathan, how you feeling about it? Then we'll wrap up for the night.
Maybe it's just because I'm coming to the point where I've got to accept it, and it's just going to kind of be a part. It's going to be a thing. It's going to be how the MLB is, at least for right now. But I did see a tweet the other day that kind of made me feel a little bit better about it. And whether you think this is better for baseball or not, they were posted that average time for spring training games this year and last year, the time has indeed gone down. Shocker. That's what they were trying to do. But on the other hand, there has also been less strikeouts, and there has also been more runs scored on average compared to last year's spring training and this year's spring training. So, I mean, as from an entertainment standpoint, maybe it has gotten more entertaining because there's more runs being scored. Maybe there's more, which probably means there's more home runs being hit. There's less guys just striking out, and you're finding yourself in less 1-0 ball games. But also at the same point, it's just spring training. Guys are still trying to figure some things out. Guys are working with new stuff, possibly pitching wise. So there's just a lot of that play. You can't really base it on the spring training.
Guys up there, stuff like that. Yeah. So it's not.
I am interested to see what the regular season splits look like and how last year compared to this year and whatnot. But at this point, I'm just kind of like, whatever, do what you want. I'm still going to show up and watch baseball. So it is what it is.
Yeah, we'll see how it all plays out when it's done. Dan, do you have something else?
No, I agree. I just, that's part of the argument that I got in with somebody the other day. They were like, well, if you're really that upset about it, you won't watch. Well, I can be upset about it, but I'm still going to watch because I mean, it's just, I've loved baseball since I was a kid, and it's always on.
That's the thing about it. Like, you're going to watch because you love the game. That doesn't mean you're not going to be mad about the changes they're making, though. Like, but at the same time, like, you're not going to stop watching it because you do love the game. Like, I mean, that's the thing. But like, speeding up the game, my point is speeding up the game does not make more people watch the game, because if they don't like the game, they don't like the game. If you like the game, you don't care if it takes that extra 20 minutes or something like that to finish, if it's a good game and stuff like that. So either way, that's how we feel. But it's been a good episode. It feels good to be back on camera with you guys and with some people watching in the comments. Thank you guys for joining. Zach, as always, you're always in there for us. We appreciate that. But as always, guys, we enjoyed it. We will plan to have an episode for you again moving forward each week. We're back in full swing. So plenty of stuff to talk about in the next couple of weeks as March Madness and baseball continues and all that kind of stuff. So catch us next week. We will see you guys later. Have a good night.